Welcome back to the Dude Hippie Machine channel. Today I got my CNC mill on. We're working on opening up some brake rotors so that they can clearance our Dana 44 hubs that are on this I Beam kit. These are the OEM brake rotors for the Silverado we got here. It's looking like it didn't do its finish pass now. So it just finished roughing out the opening. It's going to go in there and run a finish pass for us, just to clean it up a little bit better, I guess. But we should be able to measure that, check size. That's what they look like when I started. Smaller opening, as these things would have had bolted on unit bearings. Now we have switched. This I Beam kit uses a bolt-on snout with a Dana 44 hub. So you can see it needs to fit around this side hub when we slide it on there. And then we're going to use the factory calipers as well. They're a dual piston caliper. I need to make a brake caliper tab that will weld onto the back side of this knuckle. To do that, I need the rotor to be able to go on. So that is what we are working on today in here. We'll get that one measured up and pulled off here probably soon. Throw that other one in there. There we go. Brake rotor fits on the hub now. Just sitting on there loosely. So now we can work on the brake caliper mounting on this thing. I've already got the other one up in here. It just started cutting, it looks like, on its first pass. So it's going to run several passes there to rough that out, and then a finish pass. And then we can pull that one out of there, and that will be done. I have also started working on the I-beams, a little bit more welding for these F-150 over here. The first beam has gotten the plates and all the root passes done on that one. And the other beam is waiting for the plates to get sanded over here. So I got my orbital set up kind of as soon as I'm done with the mill. That'll be what I'm working on next year, getting those. So 2 different projects, different stages we're at. That's what we got going on for right now. So I'll probably get the GoPro out, start doing some work, bouncing around between the two, and come back when I got something to tell you, maybe about the mounting on the brake caliper and kind of how I go about doing it. So stay tuned. brake rotors and calipers mounted on this I Beam setup. I even was able to paint the spindle upright. If you check out the back here, I'll push this thing, and all the steering and everything's all hooked up to the gearbox. We can get in here and see, this is what we ended up making for the brake caliper tab that then I welded on the back side of the spindle here. So it gets welded right to the back side of the snout block that's in there, that holds the spindle snout. And kind of how I do it, I just kind of throw the caliper on there. I use a jack with some blocks to kind of get it in position and then clamp it all down. And from there, kind of just took some dimensions from our center line of this bolt hole over to where this back edge was. You know, get the separation on the whole pattern right there. And then was able to draw that up in CAD and cut that out on the plasma table. And then I needed an offset, so I actually had to take that's 1/4 inch, so, and then there's a 1/4 inch offset, so I made some 1/4 inch weld washers and then welded those onto the bracket. So where the bolt goes through is 1/2 inch, and then the bracket itself is 1/4 inch, but that gave me then the right offset for where the brake rotor needed to be in the caliper for position. When this thing has a set of used pads in it right now, but if the pads were new, this caliper would be able to slide on the slide pens over more and be able to get a thicker brand new set of pads on there. So that is mounting the brake calipers on this I Beam setup, and that's just how I go about it. That's a thing that whenever I build these and put them on stuff, there's all sorts of different calipers that can be used, whether if you're using like an OEM, if you're using an aftermarket something, or like this truck, same, we're going to be using OEM parts in OEM Dana 44 stuff. These are the setup more like 70s, 80s Dana 44 stuff that come with then the big single piston. So that's what we're going to put on this. There is then, Willwood makes a brake caliper for the N52. That's what those are known as, the N52, like Chevy single piston calipers. They're cheap. You can find them at any part store really across the country. But then if you did want to upgrade to a dual caliper, Willwood makes a bolt-in replacement that is a dual piston caliper for those N52s. So I always like, if it comes down to making these things a little more budget friendly when you're building them, get the thing going, and then there's options then for upgrades down the road. Say, you know, after 2-3 seasons, you're getting faster driving this truck and you're like, you know what, I do need a little more brake on this thing, or you just want to upgrade it because you're bored. There's all sorts of those types of options out there. So as you can see, we also I threw a beam under there just to kind of start getting an idea. Now that this thing, as far as beam stuff, is all done, well, I should say, other than I did get this, this is the steering shaft I needed. This is some 3/4 inch double D rod. This needs to get put in there yet and connect to the gearbox for the steering column. It'll get bolted in there, and then there is a U-joint, let's see if I can find it there, bolted on the end of the gearbox that will slide into. And then I'll probably have to also do some sort of like pillow block. I'll usually use, because this will be loose with that joint and that joint, it's going to need stabilized to not move around. So I usually use like a 3/4 inch heim with a little bracket right here. You can put a nut on each side of the heim and then adjust it in or out to keep it away from the headers. And then it will stabilize that. So that's the very last thing that I actually got to do on the beam setup. And then that's done, but close enough. Consider it, call it done as far as most of the fabrication on that. And so that being said, here's actually the other beam. I have the first pass is finished now on both of the beams. So I just finished welding this one up. This is my little welding table area. And welding these are steel beams. You can't just weld these things one shot all the way down with how long these are. They're going to warp and twist all over. So I've kind of gotten a process after making sets of these. This is set number 4 right here that I've made. So I've kind of learned how to weld them. I kind of jump around as I'm doing first passes, jump around You might be able to see too that these welds are a little undercut. That's intentionally done on this first pass. First pass, I'll come in here. These are all open 90-degree like joints. And I'll come in and try to undercut it just ever so slightly. And then once the whole thing's done, what I'll do is I'll unclamp this. And actually, you can see, so I have it clamped. I have a little bit of like negative pressure. And I did that by using some TIG rod underneath. These blocks are all the same height, but with welding on this front plate, it's going to want to bow this thing in a U this way. So to counter that, what I do is put blocks on each side, and then there's a block in the center. I use some TIG wire, some 16th to raise it, and then I'll put clamps on it and actually put load on it negatively. So that way then I can come in and I just welded this top plate all on here. I did a single pass all the way around, and now when I unclamp it, that counteracts it wanting to suck it up and make that thing super bowed out. So yeah, I don't know, just a little bit. That's kind of what you see there with it clamped up all on my table, and that's kind of the process I go through. So it takes me a little while to get a set and these parts welded up because of the process that I kind of have to go through with them being steel, but it's the only way that it has to be done if you're not trying to make like super crooked bent warped beams. So I want these things to be all nice and straight in there. So now that these are welded up with the first pass, what I'll do then, I'll unclamp this and I'll end up grabbing that one. And I'll come in with a flap wheel on a 4.5-inch grinder, and I'll actually sand this all to a nice flat 45. I'll knock the oxidation off, the little oxidation there on the weld. That'll get cleaned up, and then I'll make this edge straight again, like with all 45 all the way down this thing on every single joint. And then I will come in and go to weld second passes. I'll do the same thing. I clamp it down for second passes. I'll wipe the whole thing down with acetone after I sand it and do all that. And then I go through and do second passes. And now on the second pass that I do, we can show you because we got a done one right here. I'll actually come in, and then that's where I'll actually overlap the weld over. So that was the same process done on these. And you can see then those weld edges overlap ever so slightly over where that edge was that I sanded onto our top and our front plate, and then the same thing on the back welds there. So every 90 open joint that I do that same process for. So those tabs, these beams, all the stuff, swingers, it's the same process I do for all of that. Pretty common, kind of one of those things I don't see. It's like one of those things I see a lot of people, and I know a lot of people that do it, but then they don't ever like share that they do that. So the reason I do it is, if you look, my first passes, I don't ever take near as much time as when I'm trying to do a second pass, and my cover pass, and what I call the pretty pass. The first pass is a much more, it's not that I would say that I'm rushing, but it's more, I don't focus as much on my stability and my positioning. I'm still trying to lay the best weld that I can, but it's at a much faster pace. Doing the cover pass is a much slower thing, and that's at least the way that I do it. So what you can see when that happens, because I'm rushing, my rod control, just one of those things, I'm getting better. The more you'll do something, the better you get at it. But my rod control is still not where I'd like it to be. So you can see I have some inconsistency in my bead height. And so what I do is come in with a flap wheel, sand that all down, and it makes this 45-degree surface all nice and perfect flat again. And then when I come in for that cover pass, I'm set up a lot more. I'm taking a lot more time. It's an even slower process than that first pass. And then because I sanded that all down, it does end up, when I do the cover pass, laying and looking a lot more consistent. I can lay a lot more consistent bead. It just takes a lot more time to do it. So that's kind of a little, I guess, it's not a way that I've invented. I've seen other guys do it, and I just picked up on it. And that's kind of the process I do. So TIG welding is by no means a fast process. Everybody, I think, knows that. That's why you can make stuff if you want to. But for me, I like doing the TIG stuff, so that's how I do it. The reason I'm not doing that right now, though, that's going to be next. With that being done, kind of the next big push is going to be on this F-150 for me as far as fabrication stuff. I still do have to put a cage in this truck. But before we really get going on that, we're going to see if we can get the beams and steering on this thing. And then I'll probably jump on caging in that truck. So that's where I'm at with that. Prepping those and getting them ready for final weld. And then the beams are going to be done. That one was thrown under there because I was starting to mess with CAD. I'm going to end up drawing the beam pivots. I still do need to do a little demo work. I need to get that engine cross member and the old beam pivots out of there. But that is kind of the next stuff coming up on the orange F-150. The reason I'm not doing that quite yet, I got some shocks torn apart over here. For me, I rebuilt some shocks, and we're kind of getting that time of year. For Michigan, April 1st is around the corner, so the shock stuff starts rolling in for me. So I'll do a quick little look. We got some Michigan Crusty Rusties that are, I've actually already worked a little bit on getting those apart. Those are going to take some heat, some WD-40, and a lot of persuasion to get those open. They're very crusty, but very normal for Michigan stuff. For right now, I do have a set in here. I got some coilovers and some bypasses that are really just in for a health check. They were involved in I guess we'll say an accident. And then I'm going to do some revalving on them. So I've got the bypasses torn apart. That's kind of what I'm working on now. I'll take that apart. We'll swap out some shims, do some revalving stuff there. Here's one set of the crusty shocks I did get apart and broke down. You can kind of see that's the oil that came out of them. It's not supposed to be that way. The King oil, OEM King oil, is a clear oil, and these things come out black. And then one telltale sign of knowing if the shocks, how much I guess life or abuse they've had, is how stinky oil gets. Used up, broke down oil stinks. I don't really know why that is, but it stinks. At least to me, I don't like smelling it. So that is some stinky, dirty oil. So we'll get those things all cleaned up. We'll be able to clean all that stuff off the outside of them, place all the O-rings, put new fresh oil in them. And then, yeah, those things, like I said, we're gonna spend some time with that little torch getting those things open. So I don't, whenever I have fabrication and shock stuff in here at the same time, I always I got 3 different shock setups over there for customers. So it takes me a couple days. I clean up. That is also my little fab prep station. So I don't like doing all the grinding and sanding when I have shocks open. It just makes more work that I have to clean all that stuff when I go put it back together. So I'm going to take a couple days and get some shock work done. And the next video you guys will see on this channel will be more stuff on the F-150 and getting those beams welded out. So maybe we'll get into some more of my TIG welding stuff and kind of how I do second passes, that type of fun stuff. If you watched all the way to the end, I appreciate you. Most people don't watch these videos all the way to the end, but as always, we'll catch you on the dunes. We'll see you next time. Peace.